Ferrari may have just built a rear wing so extreme that it could be banned before the first race even begins. In Bahrain preseason testing, Lewis Hamilton activated low drag mode, and the rear wing did not just open. It almost flipped upside down. Engineers measured a straight line gain close to 12 km per hour, without extra battery deployment, without a tow, pure aerodynamic rotation. And here's the part that shocked even Vasseur and Leclerc. The system is not just about straight line speed. It changes the car's balance mid-corner. Front wing closing first on entry, rear stabilizing on exit. A dynamic shift that could be worth up to half a second per lap. In modern Formula 1, half a second is not an upgrade. It is domination. But Red Bull is already pushing back. Safety concerns. Legality questions. FIA meetings behind closed doors. Because if this rear wing stays legal, Ferrari could start the season as favorites. And if it gets banned, we may be witnessing the most controversial innovation that never reaches race day. So what exactly did Hamilton reveal in Bahrain? How does this inverted rear wing actually work? And why is the entire paddock suddenly on edge during preseason testing? Subscribe now. Because what happens next could change the championship before it even starts. To understand why this rear wing caused such an immediate reaction, we need to slow down and look at what actually happened on track. Because at first, nothing looked unusual. The SF26 rolled out of the garage like any other preseason run. Installation laps, aero checks, calibration passes. Then Hamilton hit the main straight. He activated low drag mode. And instead of the traditional rear flap opening slightly, the upper element rotated dramatically. Not a small angle. Not a marginal reduction. A near inverted position. For a moment, even experienced engineers on the pit wall had to double-check what they were seeing. Because under the current active aerodynamic regulations, movable elements are allowed. But no one expected this level of rotation. Ferrari identified a gray area in the wording. The rules define how quickly the wing can move. They do not clearly define how far it can rotate in low drag configuration. That interpretation changed everything. Once the data came in, the numbers were clear. Top speed jumped significantly. Estimates inside the paddock suggest gains close to 12 km per hour on the straight. And here is the key detail. This gain came without increasing battery deployment. That means the car was not using extra hybrid energy to achieve those speeds. It was simply slicing through the air more efficiently. Now think about what that does strategically. Lower drag means lower energy consumption at peak speed. Lower energy consumption means less clipping at the end of long straights, which means more consistent deployment into braking zones. In Bahrain, where long straights punish energy management systems, that advantage compounds lap after lap. But the innovation does not stop at straight-line speed. Behind the exhaust, Ferrari introduced a secondary aerodynamic element. Small, subtle, but powerful. This exhaust wing uses hot gases to energize airflow over the diffuser. In slower corners, where the main rear wing is no longer in low drag mode, this element helps recover downforce. So the car does not suffer when transitioning from straight to corner. That balance is crucial. Because normally, reducing drag so aggressively would compromise stability. Ferrari appears to have offset that loss. And this is where Vasseur and Leclerc likely realized the scale of what they were testing. Leclerc's sector times, particularly through the middle section of the lap, were exceptional. The car rotated sharply on entry. Stable through direction changes. No chronic understeer. Hamilton's feedback suggested he felt more connected to the rear than in previous machinery. That is not a small statement. When a driver of his experience says the rear feels stable at high speed, it validates the concept. But here is where the tension escalates. The system relies on complex hydraulics and software synchronization. Front and rear wings do not always move simultaneously. On corner entry, the front can close first, shifting balance forward. On exit, it opens first, shifting balance rearward. This desynchronization changes the car's personality mid-corner. And if that timing is even slightly off, the car becomes unpredictable. That is the risk. Which is exactly what rivals are highlighting. Because if the hydraulic system fails while the rear wing is in low drag mode, rear downforce disappears instantly. At high speed, that is dangerous. Red Bull has already raised safety concerns. Meetings with the FIA are happening. Documentation is being reviewed. And all of this is happening during preseason testing. No points have been scored. Yet the political tension feels like a race weekend. So what Hamilton revealed was not just an innovative rear wing. It was a concept shift. A reinterpretation of active aerodynamics that pushes the limits of the rulebook. If the FIA allows it to stand, Ferrari could hold both qualifying and race advantages at circuits with long straights. If it is restricted before race day, we may look back at Bahrain as the moment a revolutionary idea was stopped before it ever competed. And that uncertainty is what makes this story so explosive. Because right now, during testing, Ferrari is not just collecting data. They are testing the boundaries of the sport itself. But now we need to step away from the mechanics for a moment. Because what makes this rear wing truly explosive is not just how it works. It is what it forces everyone else to consider. If the FIA declares the system fully legal, the impact is immediate. Every team with conventional rear wing architecture suddenly faces a dilemma. Do they redesign their rear structures? Do they reroute hydraulics? Do they engineer gearbox casings to accommodate a more extreme rotation system? This is not a quick update you bolt on in 2 weeks. This is structural. Rear wing mounting points are integrated into crash structures. Crash structures are integrated into the gearbox. The gearbox connects to rear suspension geometry. Changing one part ripples through the entire car. And that means time, money, resources, all diverted. Now imagine this happening at the start of a season. Development budgets are allocated carefully. Upgrade paths are mapped months in advance. If Ferrari's interpretation stands, rival teams must choose between chasing this concept or doubling down on their own philosophy. Either decision carries risk. And risk at the start of a regulation cycle can define an entire championship. But here is another layer that makes this even more dramatic. The psychological effect. Ferrari has not just introduced a faster straight-line solution. They have demonstrated boldness. For years, Red Bull has been seen as the team that pushes regulation boundaries. Aggressive aero concepts. Creative interpretations. Now, suddenly, Ferrari is the one exploiting a gray area. That shift in narrative matters. Because it changes who is reacting and who is dictating. Red Bull is no longer only defending their own concept. They are challenging someone else's. And when a dominant team starts protesting early in testing, it signals respect. Or concern. Perhaps both. Now let's return to Hamilton. His role in this story is significant. He is not just testing a new car. He is validating one of the most controversial aerodynamic ideas of the preseason. His telemetry in the fast corners showed stability. No visible instability when the wing transitioned from low drag to high downforce. That suggests the software timing is precise. And if the system feels predictable from inside the cockpit, it strengthens Ferrari's case. Because performance without driver confidence is useless. But performance with driver trust becomes dangerous. Leclerc's feedback reinforced that. He described the car's rotation as almost artificial. Sharper turn-in. Later apex commitment. That is not just about straight-line speed. That is about balance. And balance wins races. Still, everything now hinges on interpretation. The FIA can issue a technical directive at any moment. They can limit rotation angles for safety reasons. They can clarify wording in the regulations. And sometimes, innovation survives. Sometimes, it is quietly restricted. So as preseason testing continues in Bahrain, we are watching more than lap times. We are watching a negotiation between innovation and regulation. Between engineering ambition and regulatory boundaries. If the rear wing survives scrutiny, Ferrari could begin the season with both morale and technical momentum. If it is limited, the team must adapt quickly. But even in that scenario, the message has already been sent. Ferrari is willing to push the limits. Willing to reinterpret gray areas. Willing to challenge the established hierarchy. And that alone shifts the balance of power. Because championships are not only decided by speed. They are shaped by who dares to innovate first. The only thing we do not yet know is whether this rear wing becomes the defining weapon of the season. Or the most controversial design that never makes it to race day. And until the FIA makes that decision, every lap in Bahrain carries more weight than it appears. Now let's talk about the scenario nobody inside Ferrari is saying out loud. What happens if this rear wing survives? Because if the FIA reviews the data, examines the actuation speed, studies the rotation angle, and decides it complies with the wording of the regulations, then the SF26 does not just gain a straight-line advantage. It gains momentum. Momentum in Formula One is not just performance. It is belief. When a team feels it has outsmarted the rulebook within the boundaries, confidence rises across every department. Aerodynamics, strategy, even pit wall decision-making. And in Bahrain testing, you could already sense that shift. There was no hesitation when Ferrari ran the configuration again. No attempt to hide it. They wanted it seen. That is a message. But let's imagine the competitive impact if it stays legal. On circuits with long straights, the inverted rear wing reduces drag dramatically. That means higher top speed without extra energy use. Which means battery deployment can be saved for overtaking or defense. which means strategic flexibility increases. Now combine that with the desynchronized aero system. Sharper turn-in. Improved traction on exit. The car behaves differently corner to corner. If both drivers adapt fully to that behavior, qualifying pace becomes lethal. And in modern Formula One, starting position dictates race rhythm. But there is another layer here. Tire management. Lower drag on straights means less strain on the power unit. Less aggressive deployment cycles. More stable rear temperatures. And if the exhaust wing truly adds compensatory downforce in slower sections, lateral tire slip reduces. Reduced slip means lower degradation. So the rear wing is not just about speed. It potentially affects tire life over a race distance. Now imagine that over a full season. Tracks like Jeddah, Las Vegas, even Spa. High-speed layouts where drag efficiency is king. Ferrari could hold an intrinsic advantage before setup tuning even begins. And that forces rivals into reaction mode. When teams react, they divert resources. They accelerate upgrade cycles. They risk correlation mismatches. And sometimes, that desperation leads to mistakes. This is why Red Bull's response was immediate. Not emotional. Strategic. They understand the stakes. If the concept becomes the new reference, the development race shifts overnight. But here is the tension. The more complex a system becomes, the more fragile it can be. Hydraulic reliability is not guaranteed over a 20-plus race calendar. If the wing fails in transition, rear balance disappears. Drivers must trust that the timing is flawless every single lap. That trust is still being built. Hamilton admitted the system requires adaptation. Leclerc described the rotation as artificial. That word carries risk. Artificial balance can feel magical when it works, but unsettling if it lags. So we are watching something delicate. An engineering breakthrough balanced against regulatory scrutiny and mechanical reliability. And we are watching it unfold during preseason testing. No points. No trophies. But potentially a championship-defining decision pending. Because if the FIA allows this concept without restriction, Ferrari may enter the first race not just competitive, but disruptive. And if it is limited, the political tension alone has already reshaped the narrative. Either way, Bahrain testing has revealed something extraordinary. Not just an unusual rear wing, but a team willing to reinterpret the rulebook aggressively. A driver validating it at speed. And rivals already preparing countermoves. The only question left now is simple. When the season truly begins, will this rear wing be remembered as the innovation that shifted the balance of power? Or the line Ferrari crossed just a fraction too far?